proud of all of our students and how they've progressed so far. Everything from socially, physically, mentally, they've gotten a lot stronger.
I could see that even without the electronic devices around, we could still bond ourselves with each other, and also we have a lot of chances to meet new people, to make a lot of friends, and to learn a lot of stuff at this camp.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to join us. I am Zack Jones. I'm the director of our leadership programs here at Point Avenue, and I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker and our guest mentor for this summer, Dr. Les Knotts. Dr. Les Knotts is going to be speaking today on how to raise leaders and just be providing practical insights from his decades of leadership and military experience. So without further ado, Dr. Les, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good morning. I'm, as Zach said, I'm Les Knotts. I'm a West Point graduate from the 80s. I also went back after a career in the military to instruct at West Point. And after I left the Army, I started a leadership company for nonprofits and for-profit companies. And I currently teach leadership at the University of Colorado.
Well, we are excited to have you today. Is it true you were actually a professor of some of our founders? Tommy, I don't know about right. Danny. Were you a professor of Tommy?
No, I wasn't, but well, Tommy was a fine student. I was reminding him of one of his essays, one of his particularly intelligent essays that he wrote. I think it's genius, and I use it all the time when I'm talking with people about the smart students I taught there.
Well, he spoke quite highly of you. And just started off with one of our first questions today is because you have so much experience at West Point in the military and then in business with leadership. What are some of the most impactful lessons that you have learned?
I learned that one person can make a difference. When I was young, I was surprised that I would read about a president or a leader of a country or leader of a movement, and I wondered if one person could have that much impact. But the longer I work in this field, the more I realize that the influence of one person can just ripple through an entire organization, particularly if they are a de jure leader in that organization. People tend to look up to them and follow them and take their, not just their attitude, but their character on. An entire organization can become like that person.
That's powerful. I think a lot of our students that I've experienced at camp, they tend to struggle with the same thought of why do I need to care?
I would add that somebody's always watching. So I didn't mention, but it's important that I'm also a married man and a father. And it's not just our children who are watching us, but people around us are watching. And what seems to be inconsequential, even in our body language, can have an impact and influence on what's happening around us. And because people are always watching, something that you've done that you might think or said that might be inconsequential to you can have an impact on somebody positively or negatively, even if you feel like you're not in a leadership position.
I'm curious, has there been a particular moment where you've seen this to be true in your life?
This has happened multiple times. When I was teaching at the academy, I had to walk on Tuesdays and Thursdays, walk between my office and the classroom. And when the cadets come by, they're obliged to salute us and give us the greeting of the day. And most officers many officers give a casual salute and don't look the person in the eye, but a proper salute is to render a sharp salute and look the person in the eye and drop your salute. And I would my greeting of the day was a bark. I just, and there was a cadet at my retirement years later who said, "Sir, I was going to quit the academy, but every day when I saw you, you would look me in the eye and give me a bark and a sharp salute. And because of that, I stayed to graduation.
No way. So I'm curious, is this bark something that many people did, or is this particular to you?
Yes, it's more commonly rendered as hooah. Have you heard this term or seen it written?
Okay.
Some people say hooah, the Marines say hoorah. But for me, it's just a bark.
I've heard it in some movies. I haven't experienced too much personally.
Oh, okay.
But I tell you, on a serious note, following up on your story, one thing that I think stood out to me, and a question many of our parents may have, is it seems like something almost seemingly insignificant to a particular moment, right? These simple,
Right.
whether it's being a person not known for cursing, or taking the moment to, when you salute somebody, to do that small thing, to do it very well.
Yes.
A lot of people may ask and wonder, why do I need to do this well, right? Why can't I just do the quick salute, not look you in the eye? Is there a reason that doing these small things so well is so important?
Yes. There's a Zulu term called sawubona. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a greeting, but it's more than a greeting. It's sawubona in English. And sawubona means I see you for who you are. I value you. I recognize your flaws, and I still care about you being part of my community. And it's looking the person in the eye, you take your time, you look them in the eye and say sawubona. And their response is, I am relieved because you see me. I am here, I exist because you see me. This is not just how do you do. This is it's an identification and part of a community. That's the significance of acknowledging, seeing, and actually hearing somebody for who they are, recognizing their presence and appreciating it, even with our flaws. Yes, I think it's extraordinarily significant to do that properly when we're in community with our fellow humans.
I think it's really unique. One as a leader, but then also as somebody who follows others, how powerful it is, those simple moments that we don't even recognize, right? That you're leading somebody, but it's just naturally because it's who you are, right? It's part of who your character. And I guess that's the importance of being somebody of character when you think nobody else is watching, is that there's these
Yes.
small moments that you may not intend to provide great leadership, but it's in those small moments that you can really transform somebody.
This works, it works the other way as well. And I will try not to extend the interview, but one of my commanders, one of my colonels, held me after a staff meeting. And he said, Captain Knotts at the time, I need your help. And I said, sure, sir, what do you want me to do? I'm ready. Let's go. He said, I'm trying to be a better person, and I'm trying to adjust my language, and I don't want to use profanity as much anymore. And the colonel said, I said, well, sir, what do you want me to do? He said, you can just continue to give me that look of disdain you always give me when I use curse words. And I had no idea I was doing it, but he noticed it because we were in church together. So on Sunday, we're one way. On Monday, at a staff meeting, he's a completely different person, and he didn't want to be a completely different person. But I was not aware that he noticed. I didn't even know I was doing it. But it was an example of leading up, where he enlisted my help to lead up, to make him a better leader.
It's incredible. I think people want to be inspired. Everybody wants to be better for the most part. And I think all of us contribute together to be a part of that development. And in light of this, for our parents listening, you've talked about how it's important to do the small things well, how it's important to look and identify value just intrinsically in other people. How do you practically provide that for your children?
Mostly by listening. When I was in leadership positions, and even with my students now, they have have private desires that they might not be willing to share with everyone. But once I demonstrate to them that I'm open and vulnerable to hearing what they're going through and what their aspirations are, in the past I've had them take a little card and write their aspirations on them, the ones that they're willing to share. And I commit to, if I can be involved with helping you achieve those, I'll help you do it. Once we've identified things that I can help them with, and they see that I'm genuinely going to assist them, the amount of additional and marginal effort that they'll put out to accomplish any task I ask of them is multiplied significantly. So they know they're valued. This is what we're talking about, I think, is caring. I demonstrate that I care for them by looking after them and seeing to their welfare in ways that I can. And they know that whether or not I succeed in doing that, that I have their best interests in mind. So it really comes down to caring.
It's incredible. Yeah, so for parents seeking to help shape their students or their children in this way, the greatest way to foster care and compassion is to be caring and compassionate as your child develops.
Yes, the example is the most profound.
That's powerful. That's what we try to instill in all of our campers that come, is this idea of just leading by example. In all of your experience that you've had, because you've had years of experience and diverse experience, what is there a particular moment that was transformational for you, and how did that moment shape the way that you view leadership?
Well, a transformational moment was when I was in grade school. My father was teaching me how to safely use a firearm, and so we were out in the field, and I used the rifle to point where I had seen some game previously in that area, and my father said, "You better start thinking, boy." And until that point, I didn't realize I was allowed to think out loud and act on. I thought I was just supposed to do what the teacher said, do what my parents said. And that moment, and it was just one line, "You better start thinking." I realized it's okay for me to have these independent thoughts. It's okay for me to formulate them. It's okay for me to act on them. He gave me, my father now, it had to be a person in authority, gave me permission to think. And we're not too young for that. And I've realized ever since then that people, even toddlers, are thinking about something. And it's okay to exploit that thinking, to draw that out of them, to see what they're thinking and help them to think more clearly and formulate their thoughts and their beliefs so they can behave more in line with the character they're trying to develop later. So that is, I don't underestimate children anymore because my father gave me permission to think as a child. And the extension of that was another moment when I was in middle school, where we were in Germany at the time, and I was watching my father go to work in the dark, and my mother was up before me working, and I was watching them one day, and I went, uh-oh, I'm going to have to do that at some point. I'm going to have to be an adult. I better start taking this education thing seriously, this becoming an adult seriously. And it was a significant enough moment that I actually couldn't sleep that night, anticipating how much work it was going to take to become an adult and function like my father, or function at the level my mother was doing. I wasn't ready, and I knew it, so I felt inadequate, but it charged me to work harder.
How old were you at this time?
For the first revelation, I was probably third grade, so that was probably 8. For the second revelation, I was probably 13. I was probably 13.
13.
Not even, probably 12.
Right around the age of many of our students and many of the parents watching.
Yes.
Around the age of their kids. So it is powerful to think just how mature many of the thoughts of children are, despite the fact that a lot of times we just label them off. They're kids, they're doing kid things, but they really do have incredible insights into life.
And they do, and we can learn from them, and we ought to. they're independent, unique people. And so their thoughts are independent and unique. And if we allow them to express, in fact, I think part of our job as educators is to draw out of them what it is they're thinking so that they can be better thinkers. We can help them clear their minds, do throat clearing in writing, and get to their real thoughts and their real beliefs. And those are the things that drive their behavior.
So for our parents watching, I think that's a really, really great point you just made, is part of the role of a mentor, of a parent in shaping leadership is facilitating this freedom of thought, and not just facilitating, but helping encourage it. How would you encourage or tell our parents how they can best do that?
And in my case, I'd probably use an example from my rearing our own sons. We have two sons. One of them, and the way that I do this is now that it is, and I've always done this, is individually I take them aside and do a father-son time with them. Often we do a trip. Every year, you should obviously do this more than that, but to get that exclusive one-on-one time, I would take Tyler, who's the eldest, on a road trip, and we would play and visit and do things. But when he was ready to talk, it was when he realized our one-on-one time was over. Right about the time we'd be 2 or 3 hours from home, he'd start talking about what was really on his mind. And my job was to listen, and if he asked for advice, render advice. And we did this without doing a road trip, but the most profound thoughts usually came after we spent hours or days together. His younger brother, Aaron, when we'd go on a road trip, would start talking immediately from the time we got together all the way through the entire trip. I knew everything that was on his mind. And he didn't wait until the last minute and go, oh, we're almost back home with the others. I have to get this out. And to this day, they're both unique, but the important part for each of them, and the reason our relationships are respectively so strong, is they know that I'm going to listen to them. And oftentimes they didn't want advice. They just wanted to verbally process what was going on in their minds. Now, occasionally they do say, Dad, what should I do? And both of them complain, you never tell me what to do. You just keep asking questions. And draw out of them what it is, because I've given them a foundation. And this is part of the answer to the question about developing leaders. I do recommend this too. In fact, I employ this for myself. It's a whole person concept. I actually use a matrix for them. I had a sheet of paper, and we're going to do every day. We're going to touch your physical development. We're going to touch your intellectual development. We're going to touch on your social development, your spiritual development. You can make any categories you want, but if you necked it down, it's essentially body, mind, and spirit. And every day, do something in that area. It's not always a balance. Some days you don't have time to do as much intellectual development as you might like. But I set the conditions so that each day, every day, that they were touching each of those areas. And they're inevitably going to grow if they're making a concerted effort to improve or learn something or do something or practice in those areas. And so that's part of my answer about how to help develop a leader, is when they have that foundation, then they're confident in other areas. So if I didn't waste a moment teaching them about how to do finances, which I did give them financial literacy. If they hadn't had any training in that area, because they had training, they felt physically confident or intellectually ready, they can make the transition to any other area and apply themselves with a similar bent.
That's incredible. It sounds like you spent a lot of time just laying that foundation so that when the conversations came up, they knew already that they could come to you as their dad to have these conversations, to share about what's going on. Wow.
And they were equipped to think it through.
It's harder it's harder done than it is said. I'm married.
Absolutely.
I don't have children yet, but one of the things I can attest to is that my wife is always telling me, just listen. I don't need you to give me an answer. I don't need you to fix it. Just help me think through it. Help me just process through it. And it just tends to be the last thing you want to do.
Right.
And especially with kids. because you can so easily often see the solution or see the solution you would like to see.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily help them.
That's right. In fact, you and I talked, or at least we wrote about this. When I'm trying to develop decision making in supervisors and leaders, I will take them past routine decisions to actual dilemmas where no matter what you do, somebody's going to be hurt, or there's no satisfying solution. There's no evident satisfying solution. And as they work through this, some people cry, some people want to quit thinking about, because they're real life scenarios. Some people are heartbroken. Some people are stultified. They cannot think through it. But when you come back from that, when you back down from that to routine daily decisions, those become easy. When you force their mind to think about something intractable, and then they come back to routine decisions that may have been bothering them for weeks, they go, oh yes, I can work through that. So I condition them to think in a novel way or in more difficult situations that they might not, and you hope that they will never come up with a dilemma, although most of us have encountered dilemmas in our lives, that the day-to-day routine decisions don't weigh down nearly as much.
No, I think that's very spot on. I think from my own experience and from just life in general, a lot of times there aren't clear decisions, there aren't clear answers for everything that our children are going to face. And
Yes.
unless they're conditioned for that, then when those things are going to arise, they're going to struggle quite mightily.
One of the main things that I teach when I'm instructing leaders or coaching leaders is that if it's lonely at the top, you're not doing it right. You're supposed to ask for help. We have all these people around us who we're capable of learning from, who can help us, and who, when I encounter a stranger, they're willing to help. And we're designed, I think, to live in community. At least my argument is we are best when we are working together. We were never designed to look out for number one. We were designed to help others and incorporate others in that reciprocity of helping each other. And that's one of the things I like to equip young people to do.
On that note, it sounds like a lot of this community, a lot of this development that you've experienced came from your parents, just observing them. And I believe you said your dad was a leader in the military. What did he do when he was in the military?
My father was an infantryman also, and then he became a missileer, somebody who was an air defender. And, so most of the time that I knew him, he was an infantryman before I was born, and most of the time that I knew him, he was a missile guy. And I went to see him at work once. He was the senior NCO in what's called a battery of just over 100 persons. They were all men back then. And he would let me come in and sit when he was in garrison and watch him work. And I went to watch him work when I was in 8th grade. And I'm a quiet, patient guy. So we didn't talk when I went to watch him. I just let him do his job, and I would watch. And I watched how he moved deliberately. Somebody was always watching him. There were always people around. He would move deliberately and do his work and talk to people. And I watched 2 soldiers come in. They were junior to him, and they were going to ask his permission to go on pass for the weekend. And they came in, and you could tell they were nervous. I watched them in the hallway. They were shaking. And I said, oh, they're afraid of my father. I'm not afraid of my father, but these grown men are afraid of my father. And they came in together, and he deliberately, patiently moved his work. He finished what he was doing, and he looked up, and he asked them what they wanted. And I could see them wringing their hands behind their backs. They were standing at parade rest, but they had their hats in their hands, and they were twisting their hats. And they asked him for the pass, and then he went back to work as he thought about it, and he was writing. And then he looked up, and he went like this. He just waved his hand. That was a no, and they stumbled over themselves getting out the door. And I said, they had so much respect for my father that I said, I wonder how that happened. He didn't yell, he didn't curse, he just exuded this authority. And that's what I don't know if I deliberately tried to emulate that, but I hadn't forgotten that he was able to accomplish with body language something that didn't require words and had the effect of, no, you're not getting a pass. You're excused from my office, and he didn't have to shout it at him, but they got the message because of all the other things that interactions they'd had with him up to that point. And so that's part of the thing that I learned, and I may not be answering your question, that somebody is always watching, and our reputation is being built action by action, deed by deed, word by word. And we can decide how our character is. We can't always decide how our reputation is because we don't know how people are interpreting our actions. But when we're consistent, eventually our character and our reputation will match.
Now, for you, when you're raising your kids, is this something that you had to have a proactive conversation with them directly about the importance of their reputation, or was it just simply by observing you that they picked it up, or was it a combination of both?
Well, I think you anticipated the answer. Yes, that's a combination. I was very overt about what I just told you. Somebody's always watching. You're building your reputation one event at a time, one encounter at a time. And both my sons were able to pick up on that. And that's something that we still talk about. I didn't know that somebody was watching me, but when they came and said, we want you to lead this discussion because you seem really smart in this area, I didn't even know that guy was listening to me. And yet here he is asking me to lead his group in a discussion. So it's still a very conscious thing. On the other hand, they get to see how I treat my wife. And I watch how they treat the people that they're around. And that was by observation and example. I never taught baby talk to them. I know this might be anathema to some, but I never used baby talk with my sons. I always used the language I'm using with you. I said, there's no sense in them learning a baby language than having to discard that and learn adult language. And so they blame me now for, the way I talk, people talk about me because the words I use, they don't always understand. And one of the things that I did when they were coming up is I never called them boys, although they were boys. I called them gentlemen. Okay, gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. Or I called them sons. And or I would call them sir. They'd say, hey, Dad, and I'd say, yes, sir. And as a result, they would call me sir. And I was looking, I said, nobody told them to do that. But I realized that I had done it to them so much that they just adopted it. And it wasn't even my intent for them to call me sir. I like Dad or father. But they still do it. And so they learned by exposure and by example, things that I would have wanted them to learn, but I didn't overtly teach them.
So I think one thing that you've touched on progressively throughout our conversation here is the idea that leadership and character is something that is developed over time and can be strengthened. A lot of our parents and a lot of people often take a view of leadership that says, well, you're either born with it or you don't have it, or that kind of general approach is you have it or you don't. For you, what are your assumptions on that?
Just as people are differently abled physically and intellectually, people have a different aptitude towards developing leadership. So there are aptitudes that make it more accessible to some. But I think everyone can learn to be a better leader, a more effective leader is the way I choose to phrase it. And everyone's better with a coach. So if you have people around you who are looking out for you, if you decide that you want to be a more effective leader and you enlist the help of others around you, especially those that care about you and have your best interests in mind, you will become a better leader, a more effective leader. And so I believe that there are some natural propensities, but if I didn't think that it could be developed, I would have stopped doing it a long time ago. And I've seen the evidence, of course, in people who, in fact, I'm working with a client right now here in Colorado who is tremendous at his job. He's a maintenance guy. He's a maintenance technician, and he supervises other maintenance techs. But he is very mechanical. So he treats people, he used to anyway, as if they were objects towards fixing this product. And at some point he said, the stuff that you're showing me is so obvious. I don't know why I wasn't doing it already. Because he never thought of it. It wasn't in it was in there, but it was buried deep. And his default was to treat them like a wrench, treat people like a wrench. So he'd go to a place to fix a piece of equipment. He would bypass the leaders there and just go fix the equipment. And then bring them later and say, here's what I did, here's how you keep this from happening again. There was no greeting, there was no socializing. He didn't realize how important that was to integrate the personal side with the mechanical side. But once he did, he could flourish.
So I'm curious to ask. Sorry if I ask questions that are off script, but as you're talking, I'm thinking for some of our parents, maybe questions they might have. But when you're working with somebody who may not have a particular capacity of leadership yet, like the guy you were just talking about, where he struggled maybe a little bit more with the interpersonal skills. In the beginning, when you're working with him and those capacities aren't yet developed, is it awkward for him to go through that transition? And then how do you as a coach help him go through that transition from where it goes to this is awkward and I'm feeling forced to it becomes an integral part to who he is?
Yes, it was very awkward, and often is, because what they've done to that point got them there. So I achieved this position without doing this. Why are you asking me to do it now? But what I found uniformly, almost uniformly, is that not only do they, and I give them a safe place to practice, so they can practice these skills at home. They can practice it at the corner store. They can practice it with the clerk at the restaurant. If you want to work on, in this case, interpersonal skills, I will give them drills to do in an environment where there's no risk. And so, yes, it is awkward when you're doing it at work when it's high stakes, but it's much easier to do it and go, holy smokes, this really works, when you're at the restaurant with a server who you may never see again.
I tell you that I imagine that has to be encouraging for many of our parents, because a lot of times it seems like some of our students get a little bit older, and all of a sudden you start to identify there's certain character traits I want to develop in them, and it can be extremely discouraging to try to start coaching it in them and them to start resisting or to not see the progress right off the bat. So I'm sure that is quite encouraging for many of our parents watching.
I will give two more pieces of encouragement to the parents who feel that way. One is that you might anticipate that as young people gain their independence from you, we're developing them to be responsible adults. As they gain their independence, they will withdraw, they will contend. It doesn't have to be an argument or a fight every day, but you will get to see those evidences of independent human behavior, and we should, in the ways that we can, in the judicious ways, support that. You're becoming an independent person. I want you to think for yourself. The other thing is, when it appears that they're not listening, years later, I can attest to this, they will start repeating those foundational things that you taught them. I can't say that that's universal, but I can say it's nearly so. And it's certainly been true with my sons when I said, they didn't hear anything I said. When he was 10 years old, I told him this 40 times. And now one of my sons is 30 years old, and he said, Dad, I remember when you told me this, and now I'm teaching it to somebody else. It's incredible how that rebounds. So keep feeding them, even when it appears that they're not eating.
Wow. Barrett, I think that may be one of the most powerful things that you guys could gain from this is the affirmation that your labors aren't in vain. Keep doing the hard work and trust it's going to pay off. That's great advice. Now, we've been talking about developing leadership and just that steadfast work of consistently pursuing, encouraging our students or the children's leadership development. I want to ask a question about why or how this is beneficial, right? Because as a kid, they may take some school projects on, But later down the road, beyond just being a manager at their business, how does leadership skill development impact one's life?
Here's at least one way. When we're developing our young people as leaders, we give them tasks that they think or may think is beyond their ability. We give them increasingly challenging tasks. My students will say, this seems incredible. Can I get more time? I could give you more time, but I prefer to have you do this task under time stress, time pressure. And let's see how you do. And especially when they're working in union with other people, they come up with some remarkably creative solutions to the challenges that I give them. If we have them practice that with school projects, with service projects, as I know you're wont to do, as they become older, they can, even when they can't see the outcome they want yet, they're willing to take on a task with an indefinite outcome, knowing that they're going to be able to move that project forward because they can enlist the help of the people around them, and they have a sense for doing good for the community beyond themselves that can drive and motivate them. I don't know if I'm going to finish this project, but I can move it along and hand it over to somebody who has a better idea or who's younger, has more energy than I do. And so I think the challenging of our young people leads to them challenging themselves when they're older, and as a consequence, challenging people behind them that are following them. And that, in fact, that influences leadership.
I can't help but see just this cyclical cycle, like kind of the cycle of all this, where it's you challenge it in other people, you lead by example, you encourage your children to then develop leadership capacities, which then they're going to lead by example, and it's just this progressive movement of society forward that can be profoundly powerful.
Well, it's been mostly a one-way conversation with you asking me questions, and I have a couple for you, but the main one I ask is, what kind of effects have you had on the students at camp that I'm looking forward to joining?
You know, I think camp is one, it's something I love for many reasons, but one of them, or many of them, are you brought up today, and it's because camp provides a unique setting that kids a lot of times don't get. You've talked about how character and leadership is developed in community. When you see other people doing something, that it creates a desire in you that you want to do it, that you want to participate, that you want to be better, just like everybody else around you. And I think that camp provides that, especially our leadership camps, because the entire purpose that we're there, and we preach that from the beginning to kids, that you're here because we want you, and you should want to be a better person, to be a better leader. And so when that environment is set and that community is set around those parameters, kids are looking to each other, looking to mentors, and they're saying, how do I get better? How do I improve? How do I be like so-and-so? And that really inspired me. Another thing that you've discussed is the importance of caring. One thing that I've been touched with has been watching our mentors, all of the mentors at leadership camp, watching them take the time every day. And this is something it's just been profoundly impactful for me, is every night before our kids go to bed. One thing that we have our counselors do is go room to room, and they take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long the conversation goes, and they ask every kid at camp, how are you doing? How was your day? And then we usually have some fun questions and topics. But what this does is it fosters a relationship. It fosters this idea that there's somebody older that you kind of admire that is taking the time to invest in you. And I think all of these experiences combined really create a powerful experience that is a lot of times transformational for our campers. And so that's why I'm excited for hopefully many of the parents watching to have the opportunity to send their kids to camp. And also some of the feedback I've gotten from our parents is on the backside of camp, kids do come back impacted and changed, but it allows them a moment of reset with their kids, is they get to, in the evening, start to or continue some of the habits that their kids had at camp, asking them about their day, asking them what they learned, and it can change even the nature of some of our parent student or parent child relationships on the
Sure.
backside of camp.
I think leadership means being confident and brave and like leading people.
Previously, for me, leadership is just like leading a group, and they will follow you because you are the leader. But after the boarding camp and my experience as the platoon leader, I think leadership is something really major.
You feel for others, like you feel what they are feeling right now. If they cannot sleep, you feel for them, and you have the guts to speak up and be for your team. I really appreciate the mentors because they're really kind and help us a lot. I really like the mentors here. I really appreciate them. They're funny, kind, but also very strict for us to be at the right time at the right place. Oh, and I love it in camp.
And for my parents, I think I also need to thank them to send me to this camp, because I could see that even without the electronic devices around, we could still bond ourselves with each other, and also we have a lot of chances to meet new people, to make a lot of friends, and to learn a lot of stuff at this camp.
Did you have any more questions?
Well, here's one.
That
Here's
sounds
one
good.
for you, Zach.
That's
How have you been changed by your exposure to camp? I mean, from what I can tell, you're in a culture that was unfamiliar to you. You seem like you're sincerely involved in helping young people grow and become better people.
I would say one thing, and this may just, there's been many ways, but one thing that I've actually been really reflecting on lately has been when you're working in a culture, in a place that's unfamiliar, and then particularly the work that I get to do with students by mentoring them. One thing that has really been on my mind lately is how important it is just to be present. Um, there are a million things going on, and trying to operate a camp where you have nearly 100 people that you're coordinating and leading and problem solving for. One of the most important things to do at any given moment is just to stop and to be present and take the moment to invest in the people around you. Because if you don't, life is going to be this perpetual cycle of distractions and busyness. And soon enough, 5 years will go by, 10 years will go by, and you would have never built relationships with the people right around you. And I think that's something at camp that has really impacted me, and something that I want to bring to all of our staff and to all of our students is just the power of stopping, acknowledging the craziness, but then also taking the time to invest in people that are all around you because
Sure.
of the impact that it can have. Dr. Knotts, I can't thank you enough on behalf of myself, Point Avenue, and all of our parents watching for taking the time out of your busy schedule and sharing just rich experience and wisdom with all of us. And I hope it's something that we can watch and we can take the time to invest and apply to all of our relationships, whether it's marriages, work relationships, or with children, because of the impact that it can have. Before we log off, I wanted to ask, do you have any final parting words to share? Maybe some final moments of wisdom to share with our parents?
Well, let me reach deep. I would say that we can't control very much, but we can set the conditions for people to become better. And what you mentioned multiple times is the caring and taking the time. And those are listening and taking time and being present do help set the conditions for us to be in relation with people so they can hear whatever advice we have. And as I said, when we were talking, we are meant to work together. We are better together. And when we set the conditions for people to be better together, they will be better. They will meet our expectations. And as parents, and you can imagine, we talked about one event in one cadet's life that caused him to graduate. You can imagine if you had a whole week of those events, how different a person can be at the end of that week. It can be transformational, and it should be.
Again, Dr. Knotts, thank you so much for taking the time to just share wisdom with all of us. Parents that are watching, thank you for taking the time just to care, to take the time to investigate how you can better support and encourage your children as they grow. And for us at Leadership Camp, we are beyond honored just to have the opportunity to work in partnership with you guys as we encourage this next generation to hopefully lead us towards a better tomorrow. So we look forward to seeing you guys around. And again, thank everybody for coming out and participating today.
Goodbye. Thanks for the time. Looking forward to seeing you this summer.
All right, we look forward to seeing everybody this summer. Bye.